Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. Today we're jumping right back into my snowblower build here. We got to do the last couple finishing touches just to get this thing ready to go. We're about mid-November now. We've already had our first snowfall. It was only about an inch, so it was nothing that needed to be snowblowed. It melted off within an hour, but winter's definitely around the corner. This thing's been put on the back burner. I don't know if you can tell on camera there, but it's covered in sawdust from some work I was doing out here. And I've got to get these last few things done in order to be able to use this for cleaning up the driveway and the path from the barn up to their garage this winter. All right, and so next, even though I wanted to start with adding the additional lighting to the front, like I had mentioned in the last episode, I can use this without that lighting in the front, but one thing I won't be able to use this without is some weight in the rear end. Now, I know that they sell Craftsman wheel weights. There's probably aftermarket ones. I did see some on Facebook Marketplace, but instead of spending money on something, I figured why not just go ahead and utilize something I have on hand that I don't have to spend any money for and give me the weight in the rear end that I need. So what I came up with is this. So when we bought the house and the barn here that came with the house, there were about 4 of these big concrete blocks here in the barn. Never really knew what they were. They don't look to me like a foundation type block or a landscaping type block. I just pushed them over in the corner. I never really had a use for them. And then now the more I'm thinking about it and I'm getting this project, I'm pretty sure I've seen tractors, like large tractors with these, you know, on the front or on the rear, you know, stacked up side by side and used as weights, you know, instead of those big iron weights, those hook-on weights that you see. I could be wrong. These could just be some sort of type of building block, but trying to jog my memory, I think I've seen this before on tractors. They've got like the shelves on the front, and again, like I said, side by side, and they're used as weights. Regardless, I'm gonna try to use this as the weight here on the rear end of the tractor. Width-wise, it's perfect. I think height-wise, it's perfect, and at least how it makes sense in my head, I think I should be able to set this on the 90-degree lip that is already on the rear end of this tractor for putting like tow hitches and whatnot on. And then if I just drill a hole through the top of this concrete block and then a piece of threaded rod that will anchor into the steel there, right about here on the back of the tractor, and then run that through with just a nut and a big washer on the front of the block, it should stay put without having to anchor anything down below. I could add some sort of L bracket afterwards if I feel like it's not gonna sit there, but in theory, once that bottom corner goes in, as long as I can secure that top and that top can't move, it shouldn't be able to come off the bottom. But for right now, I just need to get things mocked up and see if that's gonna work or not. So first thing we gotta do is just remove these 4 bolts here that come on the tractor. I'm assuming this is probably for attaching a bagger or something like that, but they're gonna be in the way, so we gotta take those off. And then we can go ahead and see how well this is gonna sit in here or not. I did actually just take this out in the back of the barn and hooked it up to my electric hoist that I use for processing deer when I hang them. This thing weighed 112 pounds. If I remember correctly, when I was looking at the wheel weights, I think they come with a combined total of 80 pounds, so 40 pounds on each tire. So this should be more than enough to handle as a counterweight for that snow thrower on the front. Yeah, I think this might just work. All right, so now that I've gone ahead and I've looked things over a little bit, I've already decided to change my plan a little bit. Instead of the idea of drilling a hole through with a piece of all thread coming through and then putting a nut in a washer and anchoring it, although I think that would have been easier, I don't think it would have been very strong. And the more I looked at it, I just don't think there was a great way of doing that. But because this lines up almost exactly at the top of this plate up here, I think what I'm gonna do is just use a metal strap that will bolt into the top of this back plate. I'll bend it down, and I think I've got enough on this piece of stock that I just cut down. This was a piece of angle iron. I threw it on the bandsaw real quick. That's why there's not the straightest cut on there, but I didn't have anything else. But we'll bend that down, and then I think there's enough where it'll actually bend under. And then I don't think I have enough to come back over to reach this and anchor it in, but we might be able to just drill like a hole in it and then a hole in the concrete and just have like just like a Tapcon or something. It should be pretty sturdy just with that wrapped around, but we'll have to figure out something. We'll see how that goes. I think that's definitely the route I'm gonna go. So we gotta get this back plate off first. All right, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a nut cert here right in the center of this. So it's 12 1/4, so 6 1/8 will be the center. All right, and I've decided to go with, this is just what I had around. It was the biggest one I had so I could get the largest bolt for the available nut cert I had in there to make it nice and strong. This is an M8 by 1.25 nut cert. All right, I already went ahead, I drilled a hole here in the piece of stock. Obviously I'll use a washer with probably a lock washer on there for final install, but that'll go on there just like that. So we'll go ahead and get this plate reinstalled in the rear end and go from there. And then also, if you can see, this plate has these formed gussets down here in the corner. I went ahead and just real crudely with a hammer and a chisel, just put some relief notches, actually the other one's over here, just put some relief notches in the back of this block so that when it does go ahead and set on that bracket there, it actually sits nicely up here into the corner. So now I can go ahead and try to muscle this thing up in there, get that piece of bar attached, and then try to get my measurement on where the first bend needs to be. All right, so let me go ahead. I'll bring this over to the vise and I'll be right back with you after we put this first bend in it. So at this point I continued on making this bracket. I did get it all the way finished and it ended up not working the way I had intended in my head, but hey, that's, you know, how you figure things out with a little bit of trial and error. So I won't bore you with all the footage of me making it. I'll just show you here at the end when I figured out it wasn't going to work, at least with just this one single bracket. So I'd say I'm pretty happy with that. You can see there's some side to side. You can kind of rock back and forth. But the bottom, never mind. All right, so that wasn't a complete fail. It was a good proof of concept. I know what I'm going to do for the future, but let me get this set up right now. I'll explain what I'm gonna do. The problem is I can't finish it out completely. I just don't have enough steel stock on hand to make a strap. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep that top bracket so that I can put this in place. I've just chopped it down. So this is all that's left of it. Just this piece that'll go up there and hook over the top, and I can put that in. That'll hold the block in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a strap that will connect up to the bolt, the lower bolt here that holds this plate on, and it will come out and wrap all the way around the block and hook up to the bolt on the other side, snugging that down. I wish it were down a little bit lower. I could always add nut certs if I really wanted to, but for right now, that's what we're going to do. I really need that up there because what I do need to do is, as it sits right now, there's clearance on the tires, but we're going to be running chains, and I'm not sure if those chains are going to add enough width to interfere with the block. So let's just get this up there into position, and then we will go ahead and see if we've got clearance for those chains or not. All right, so I just picked these chains up on Amazon. They had pretty decent reviews. These are the ones I'm going to go with. Never actually hooked chains up. I'm going to try to go ahead and give this a go, just based on common sense without having to look up how to put them on. So bear with me for a second. Worst case scenario, I might have to jump on Google and look up how to do these, but I think I got an idea how these are supposed to go on. Right here my camera died, but what I did was I got the chains all installed and ended up realizing that there just wasn't enough room between the chains and the concrete block.
So I took the block off and realized I needed to remove about 1.5 inches off of one side of the block. So the way I figured I could do that easily with the tools I had on hand was I just took my hammer drill with a smaller size drill bit and I just drilled a line of holes along the face of the block all the way through, basically just to create a fault line. Hit it with a sledgehammer and it broke all along that one side, and that cut the block down to the width that I needed, and that's where we pick up here.
All right, so I got that block shortened up. I didn't weigh the block itself, but I weighed the pieces that came off. It was about 17 pounds. So, and there was like some chunks and dust on the floor. I doubt it was 3 pounds worth, but let's just do easy math here and say it was 20 pounds. We said it was 112, so we should be about 92 pounds. Again, I still haven't gone and looked it up. If I'm remembering correctly, the Craftsman branded wheel weights were combined weight about 80 pounds, so we should be around there. If they were combined weight maybe like 100 pounds, we might be a little too light in the rear end. Worst case scenario, I just have to suck it up and buy the wheel weights, but I figure as long as I got some stuff on hand, why not just try this out? Completely free, costs nothing to me, although I do now have to run out and grab some steel to make that strap. But all in all, I think this should work. But now we got to get these chains on. All right, so they're on there pretty good and tight. They're fairly centered. I'm assuming they'll kind of center themselves around the wheel as it gets driven around. This side ended up being a bit tighter than the other side for whatever reason. I still may grab, they make chain tensioners, kind of these little spring-loaded arms that come out to just like a center connecting hub, and then that kind of squeezes the chain down, keeps tension on those, but they seem tight enough where they shouldn't come off. Couldn't seem to quite get this one wrapped around to cover this spot, but I'm assuming as it drives around that'll start to center itself around the wheel a little bit better. You can see the block here where I drilled all these relief holes in it and then just smacked it a couple of times with a sledge, and then it just split right there on that seam. So now all I got to do, like I said, I'm just going to try to reach in on these lower bolts here, and then that will bolt in the strap that goes all the way around the bottom of it, and that'll hold that on there. And I think that should be enough weight. Last thing we need to do is, like I said in the last video, the front light here just casts too much of a shadow out over the front end. So I've ordered some lights, and we're gonna install those right on the front end here with a disconnect plug on this side. That way in the summertime when I don't need this installed on here and I disconnect the snow thrower, I can just disconnect the harness, the lights and the harness will just stay right here on the front end of this snowplow. So let's dive into that and get that done.
So if you notice on the top of the snow thrower there, there's already a nutsert installed, and on the far end there's a bracket already installed. I tried to install these on the top. It's where I wanted them and it's where the lights should be, but just as it were, I didn't really look enough at the packaging when I bought the lights, and the brackets don't work in terms of being mounted on top and being able to point at a downward angle out in front. They were pointed upward, which just didn't work. I don't like the idea of mounting them on the front face of the snowblower, but with a lack of brackets on hand, I'm just gonna have to go ahead and do it. And if we've got to throw new lights on because these get broke later on down the road, so be it.
All right, guys, so with that, everything's installed. Haven't tested it out yet, but you can see I ended up going with the mounting that I didn't want to do. Obviously, having it mounted on the front of the unit like this, it's going to kind of expose it to, if the snow is really high, just the snow crashing into this potentially. But for now it's there, and if they do get damaged and break off, then when I buy another set, I'll be sure to get ones that have a mount that sit up higher so that they can tilt down more, because trying to tilt them, because that flat spot there, you can see angles back anyway. So I just couldn't get a downward angle, and an upward angle just didn't make sense. So they're pointed at a little bit of a downward angle now. It's just gonna have to do, but at the very worst case scenario, the harness is there, and I can just wire in different ones that have better mounts later on. So then the harness comes all the way down, and then just in line with the connector here for the light in the hood, I wired up a second connector here that's separate to the unit itself, so when I take this off for the summertime, I can just unplug it there and the whole harness stays with the snow thrower unit. So let's go ahead, I'll throw this back on the tripod. I haven't had this on a trickle charger, so I don't know if this is gonna start up, but we'll give it a shot. All right, so actually that was a little interesting. If you're subscribed to the channel or you checked out the playlist for this build, one of the first things I did to get this thing ready was replace the valve cover, because the valve cover was leaking, and I thought that's what the smoke on startup was just oil that had dripped down on the muffler and then burning off. But you saw right off the bat there a whole cloud of smoke, so this mower has a whole ton of mileage on it, or I guess hours technically. So I'm thinking there's something going on internally with the engine. It's probably just a tired engine. The tolerances are a little loose, and it's just allowing some oil to pass through while it sits and collect, and then on first startup it's burning all that oil off. All right, guys, so it actually has been just a little bit of time since I filmed that last bit that you just watched. I have actually gotten this out, and I've used it one time. I just didn't have time to finish up the last little details while filming, so I just came out real quick before the snowstorm was supposed to come, and I threw quite a few of the last little odds and ends on, and I just want to go ahead and get this video wrapped up, the final little details that I had to add on to this to get it ready to go. And then next time we get a snowstorm where it's daylight out and I can get the camera set up, show you how it works, I'll do that. But let me just show you the last few things that I went ahead and did. So the very first thing I did before that snowstorm was coming was I came out and I did an oil change. The oil that was in it was just a standard 30 weight oil. This is the first time I've used it in cold weather, so for the warm weather for mowing and just general utility type stuff, a 30 weight oil was fine. And then in the startup, when we installed the LED lights to see how they were working, you saw that smoke again. I asked around a little bit, and I guess these Briggs & Stratton motors, they tend to just wear the cylinders a bit, and so it's probably most likely just some oil seeping by into the combustion chamber and burning off on first startup. So somebody recommended I should try a 10W40 weight oil, so that's what we went with. Ran it once, like I said, seemed to run fine. Haven't done a cold startup yet to see, now that it's been sitting for a while, if it's going to burn off or not, but we did the oil change on it. And then, like I said, I had to go to the store, and I just made that strap that I was talking about. It just ties in to where this back plate mounts onto the mower, bolting point down here, and just comes around and wraps and bolts right in onto there. I'm still going to keep this guy up here, because what this allows me to do is get this hooked up with the block in there, and then the block doesn't want to fall off the back, and then I can go ahead and get this strap on there just to keep it contained and in place. And then the only other couple things I did were just things I noticed after I had started using it. I know I had mentioned I was going to go ahead and use these little wheelchair wheels that I picked up for the front end for going across the lawn, because I do like to leave a little bit of snow so that it's not bare grass, but they just didn't work out the way I wanted. They set up on there a little bit flimsy. I might be able to redesign the setup in terms of like the spacers that you need on either side of this so that the bearing will still roll. And then even then, utilizing the holes in the sides of the snow thrower skids, it really didn't gain me much clearance at all. So all I did with that is I'm just gonna end up just using the skids. I'll just use them how they were designed. I'll lift this up, I'll drop them down for doing the lawn, and then when I get up to the driveway, we will go ahead and drop them back in this position here. But I did have to go through and I had to cut each one of these off. They were so badly rusted, and I've replaced them with some stainless steel hardware. So that should solve that problem. So basically, I'll just come out, drop these down, do the lawn, zip them with an impact, drop the blower down till it sits in this position, tighten them back down, and then I can go do the driveway. And then lastly, really the big modification I did is, I think it's just because this is a relatively smaller tractor. Now I could put bigger wheels and tires on it. A lot of people do that. But this was designed for the 917 series tractors, but this is, I think, like the smallest model within that 917 series of tractor. And when you would go ahead and lift this up, now I've modified it since, but I'm just showing you, when you go ahead and lift this up so it's locked off the ground, I barely had any room. Like, there was not a lot of room when it was locked off the ground, and I really didn't like it. So I went ahead and I looked at the front end, and that engagement really comes from these brackets. There's an identical one on the other side, these brackets here, and these are the factory brackets. And basically all I did was I just made up some shorter ones. So see down in there, they're pretty significantly shorter, but it does the job. I have way more clearance now up under the front end when it's in the upright and locked position, which I'm a lot happier with. The only thing, I may have made them a little too short, because if I drop this back down, right here where that pin goes through is where the travel is, and it's in the all the way back position right now. And I wish this thrower weren't so heavy so I could actually like lift the front end up and see how this articulates. I don't know if that's going to stop this from articulating down, which you kind of need for when you're going over, terrain where the front end of the tractor may come up, but you want the snow thrower to maintain contact on the ground. It has to be able to drop down. I don't know if that's going to stop that or if it's only part of the lift mechanism. So I'm just going to have to keep an eye on it. And if it looks like it's not dropping down, then I may have to lengthen these brackets just a little bit more so that I have a little bit of room there to work with. But all in all, I was happy with it. And the only other issue I ran into, we've already talked about before. This belt here, this long one, was the one that I ordered, and it's supposed to be the right one. It's 114 inches long. The only thing I did notice, and I can't find the markings on it right now, it was supposed to be 5/8 by 7/16, and the markings on this says it's 21/32 or something like that. I don't know how much of a difference that would be in terms of fitting around the pulleys, but it is 114 inches long. Everything I found says it's supposed to be 114 inches long, but I cannot fit that belt on there. It just will not fit. It's too short. And then the belt it came with was this belt here, which, if I remember right, it's too late now. I've worn the numbers off the back of it, but before, if I remember right, when I could see the numbers and I Googled it, this was a 117-inch belt. And I think it was just a little bit too loose. I actually threw the belt 2 times when I was doing the heavier stuff out at the end of the driveway. And you can kind of see along it now. It's kind of furry because you can see it's been wearing, and I could smell that it was slipping. I think that's what I was smelling. You could kind of smell that that hot kind of burning belt smell. So I think this one's too loose at 117 inches. That one over there, I can't get on there at 114 inches. So I just ordered a 115-inch belt. and we'll see if that works. And it's just an inch longer, but it's the same dimension. So it's 115 inches long instead of the 114 inches, and it's 5/8 inches wide and 7/16 inches deep on the V-groove. That's supposed to be the stock dimensions of the Craftsman belt that it came with. So I can only try that out if we get some snow before that belt gets here, because I did order it. This one will work. You can't get enough, even with the tensioner pulled completely tight. There's still quite a bit of play in this belt. I think this 117-inch belt's just too loose, and for whatever reason, the 114-inch belt that's the manual says you're supposed to run, it just won't work. I don't know why, unless that belt, because that's not like a Craftsman belt or a Sears belt, that's an aftermarket belt. Maybe that one's just too short. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm gonna try the 115-inch belt and see if that works. So like I said, next snowstorm we get where it's daylight out, I'm gonna set some cameras up and just film using this thing and show you guys how it works. As always, guys, I really appreciate you watching the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed to the channel already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.